What up, gamers? I'm Aaron, and quite frankly, your IO score is going to be your biggest legacy. You might have thought it'd be something meaningless, like your work in cancer research, or your kid who spends all soccer practice playing in the dirt. But no. All that will matter when we are dust is how high we placed on the Mythic Plus leaderboard. So, with that in mind, you're probably looking for someone who can take you from the man or woman you are today into a ruthless IO machine. And that's where I come in. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is actually pretty fucking big picture. And that's that World of Warcraft is so incredibly different from any other competitive game, for the sole reason of, it is PvE. If we were playing something like League of Legends, where we're up against other players, then your road to improvement looks completely different. Because if you're a dumbass, then skill-based matchmaking means that your opponent is a dumbass too. Nobody knows what anyone is doing, and nothing makes sense. But in Mythic Plus, we at least know one side of this dungeon is going to operate somewhat reliably. So that means that pretty much 90% of your World of Warcraft journey is going to be about understanding your opponent better. And the better you understand them, the easier your keys are going to be. To really bring this example home, I want to run you through some of the absolute worst mobs in Mythic Plus history. If we go all the way back to Battle for Azeroth, we encounter the Shadow of Zool, which was basically an entire extra boss, but it gave count and was a pain in the ass to skip. And later on, we ran into the Glacial Proto-Dragons in Halls of Infusion. These mobs were so terrible that players eventually resorted to just climbing up walls to escape them, like it was a 2005 out-of-bounds exploration video. And if this isn't your first season, you might remember Cinderbrew Meadery's Hired Muscles. These mobs basically turn the first 3 minutes of your Keystone into a jousting match, where your group puts every single offensive and defensive cooldown and bloodlust up against every hired muscle at the same time, and you just prayed that you came out alive. But what do all of these shitty mobs have in common? Well, every single one of them warps the way that you play the key. And while those are the most egregious examples, it's important to understand that even the shittiest, most insignificant mob that does nothing but follow your tank around and auto-attack still warps the way that you have to play a key. So once you begin to understand the individual pieces in the dungeon, you can begin to understand the pulls. Because if mob A does nothing but auto-attack your tank, and mob B does nothing but occasionally cast a spell, well then you can probably just mash those together, and you create a Mythic Plus pull. And as your knowledge grows and you know how to disarm the different types of mobs, then pulls that seemed crazy 100 keys ago now seem incredibly easy to handle. And if you reduce pretty much any Mythic Plus question to this level, it all ties back into this concept. I mean, when do I use my defensives? When do I pop Bloodlust? It all comes down to understanding your opponent and knowing how you can use your team's resources to counter the mobs and the timer. And here's one other thing that not enough people talk about. There's only so many different kinds of mobs. I mean, it's not like when Blizzard adds a new dungeon, every trash pull is a completely new puzzle to solve. A big part of being good at World of Warcraft is knowing that when you see a mechanic, you've probably seen it before. I mean, take a look at this guy. He just shoots heavy physical damage at random targets. And you've seen that before. You've seen it in Priory, in Throne of the Tides, Blackrook Hold, and probably 1,000 other dungeons over 20 years. So really, every single mob that you learn to deal with will pay off for the entire rest of your World of Warcraft career. But that dumbass DPS you played with last key, he's not paying attention to what the mobs do, he's just autopiloting through his keys, and he'll never escape 12s. But you're not going to be anything like him if you pay attention to the details of what each piece of this puzzle is actually doing. But, speaking of escaping low keys, let's move on to the next tip. It is super fucking easy to tell when you suck in Raid. I mean, you'll die all the time. Your parses are all gray, and your ass gets fused to the bench. But it's not so easy to tell in keys, and that's because Keystone logs are completely unreliable. Every group is doing a different route, they have different raid buffs, they have different utility. No Keystone log is really the same encounter. And I'm gonna tell you that in every key, There are a million situations in which all 5 players, tank, healer, DPS, every single one of them causes a million tiny problems because they do not understand their character's limits and the limits of the characters around them. What is my dumbass talking about? Well, we've all had that experience where you queue up for a time-walking dungeon and you've got a tank that pulls 2 mobs at a time. You end up spending 6 hours in the lost city of Tolvir. And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we've all had tanks that pull 47 casters and your entire group gets fireballed to death within 10 seconds. On both ends of that spectrum, this is a problem of that player not understanding his limits. You know, in the first example, he doesn't understand his own limits. He doesn't realize that players with half as much gear can tank 10 times as many mobs. And in the second example, he doesn't understand his team's limits. He thinks that just because a tank can live 47 casters, surely the squishy healer and DPS can too. And this is not a tank-specific problem. I mean, we've all had healers complain when they're in like +6 keys that their teams never use defensives. But in +6 keys, every single enemy mob has a foam sword and is wearing Hulk hands. I mean, a healer who knows what they're doing can heal that key in their sleep even with no defensives whatsoever. But we're still gonna have to listen to him complain. And as for DPS players, I mean, you'll have DPS players who haven't kicked a spell in 4 dungeons, and they do peanuts damage. But they'll tell you, if I just had an algeth'ar puzzle box, I would be owning. But meanwhile, players were already bursting harder last expansion. Now, basically, the point I'm trying to get at here is that your World of Warcraft character, and everybody else's too, is capable of so much more than you would expect. And whether you're the guy who's completely lost in 5s, or you're owning in 15s, it's pretty fucking likely that you are not even getting close to the potential of what is possible. And that is what we really want to focus on going into higher keys. Usually, this is going to come down to doing more damage, doing more healing, and having better survivability. There are some other ones too. There's obviously handling mechanics well, using crowd control, but the big 3 are critical in a world where every single key level means that mobs do more damage and have more health. So yes, while you are going to have teammates that do all kinds of things that piss you off, we need to keep our focus on ourselves. In each key you do, you want to be thinking about what you can do to come closer to your character's potential, or what you could have done to make the keystone smoother. You really want to stop coping in ways like, oh, I did top interrupts. If your damage sucks, you need to fix it. And let's say you're a healer, who lets his teammates die. You want to stop saying things like, oh, he should have used the defensive, and start saying things like, if I was Ellesmere, I could have saved him. And let's just get on the same page here. I am not saying that you're wrong. That guy probably should have popped a defensive. That tank's route does suck, and that DPS does do no damage. But what are we gonna do about it? Are we gonna go back in time and invite someone else? Are we gonna stop pulling the dungeon and just cry and chat for 20 minutes? Look, your teammate bricked your key. That is gonna happen all the time, even at title level. And you are gonna brick more keys than you will ever know. But that's okay, because we didn't play an entire season of World of Warcraft to time this one key. We're playing an entire season of World of Warcraft so that we time a greater percentage of our next 100 keys. And I promise you, the version of yourself that focuses on that is going to have so much more success. When you look back 100 keys later, you'll see all the cooldown sets you missed, all the openers you fucked up, and the mechanics you stood in. And you'll realize that you were capable of things you didn't even know were possible. Just like I did the other week, when I finally got to reject my first ever sponsorship video for a WoW boosting website. But I mean, why would you ever need one of those when everything you need is free with a Razzun subscription? But anyways, I'm gonna get on to tip number 3 so we can get you back to blasting dungeons quicker. You remember at the start of this video when I said that your IO score would be your only legacy? Well, that is unfortunately true. But we have to acknowledge that IO is still a terrible metric to actually measure a player's skill. I'm about to break your heart here, But don't worry, because we're gonna build it back up together. Here we go. There are 1,000 players, probably even tens of thousands of players, that are way worse than you are. And they are going to finish this season miles ahead of you on the leaderboard. The main reason for this is that IO doesn't require you to have a positive win rate. You just need one good key. And come the end of the season, there's going to be infinite noobs that got that one good key at a higher level than you did. Why does that happen? Well, one big reason is that when you have a bad key, you just log off. Or here's what's more likely, okay? You wake up, you open the group finder, and you see a couple keys that might be IO. But you say, I don't really feel like pugging today. I'll just wait for my friends to log in. You spend 3 weeks waiting for the perfect schedule overlap, and it never comes. But meanwhile, your Keystone nemesis, Johnny Dumbass, he has none of these problems. He is spam queuing keys all day, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. He is queuing up and getting declined to 95% of keys. And 95% of the keys that he does get invited to, he bricks instantaneously. But it doesn't matter, because Johnny Dumbass only needs one good key. He'll take 200 tries for his 12s, another 100 for all 13s. But 1,000 keys later, Johnny Dumbass has resilient 17s. And you're still waiting for Mercury to exit retrograde before you queue up for Nexus Point Zenith. Now, the easy thing for me to say here was that you need to play a lot. I mean, Johnny Dumbass is playing a lot, but that is not what I want you to take away from this. What I want you to understand is that when it comes to Mythic Plus, you will get absolutely nothing that you do not put yourself in a position to get. Sitting back and waiting for IO has never worked for anyone. If you want a Mythic Plus team, they're not just going to appear out of nowhere and beg you to play with them. If you want Mythic Plus friends, they're not looking for players who are AFK in Silvermoon. And if you want to get better at keys, you're going to have to go play keys and make some serious effort to improve where you suck. If you take nothing else from this video, I want you to take this one lesson. WoW players hate friction. All that the average Keystone doer wants is to queue up for keys, get invited, and get IO. He doesn't want to ask you if you want to start a team and find 3 other guys. They don't want to ask you to sync up schedules and queue together. But having those things, actually having a team, having friends, is such an unbelievably big advantage that if you make the first move, a lot of people are really likely to say yes. So the real lesson here is that you need to put yourself in the driver's seat, and you need to make the opportunities happen for yourself. Because what a lot of people are doing right now is they're saying, man, I really wish I had some IO. Maybe if I just fly some laps around Silvermoon, it'll come to me. But that didn't work in Dornegal, and it's not gonna work here. So if you want to go further than ever before this season, I'm gonna give you all the tools you need to do it. But you're going to have to actually make an effort to do it. So if you'd like some more sage wisdom for the road, I'd love it if you'd check out some of my other content. I think you'll really like it. But until then, I'm Aaron, and thanks so much for your time. Peace. If you take nothing else from this video, take this one thing. WoW players hate bouncing on it crazy style.